Managing Violence Podcast, Season 4, Episode 4. Marc Animal MacYoung. Welcome to another episode of the Managing Violence Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Saunders, and today we have a legend of the self-defense world, one of the most prolific authors in this space, Marc Animal MacYoung. He's written something like 30 books on the subject of violence across a whole different spectrum. He was also one of the very first to start publishing in this space. He's put out a bunch of DVDs, probably even VHS tapes. Marc MacYoung has been around. Well, he was already prolific and a legendary when I got into this business. So Marc's been around for a long time, and he has some tremendous insight. Today we focus on the aftermath of violence, the cost of engaging in violence, and I think you're going to find that conversation very, very interesting. This is a long episode, so we're going to jump straight in. Quick shout out to our new Patreon supporters, Glenn and also Ron Amram, former guest and now Patreon supporter as well. How cool is Ron? Shout out to the boys at Kaya in Perth, Western Australia. Ron's gym, amazing training facility and great human beings as well. But I'm not going to plug any more of my stuff. Head over to patreon.com/managing violence if you'd like a shout out or to receive the bonus content at the end of this episode. But for now, here is Marc Animal MacYoung. Marc MacYoung, thank you for joining us on the show. It's a tremendous honor to have you here.
Well, thank you for having me.
As we're just talking about offline, your work is so prolific. I mean, you've probably written more books than just about anybody on this subject. And when I started in this field, you were already a prolific author. You already had 20 years head start. So your work has been the soundtrack of my early development. So it's fantastic to be able to talk to you. Well, not quite face to face, but close enough.
Yeah, just a small continent and an ocean in between us, but that works. And yes, thank you for having me. And again, it's one of those, I mean, I've been doing this for over 30 years now, so I might have just come up with an idea or two.
Wow. Yeah, your work has influenced many of us, and I'm sure that many of your ideas have been taken credit for elsewhere, but it doesn't change the validity of the idea.
Well, and I mean, that's one thing. I have a saying, which is, if something is true, you can find manifestations of it everywhere.
That's absolutely true.
Truth is not proprietary. And one of the problems that you'll encounter is people who go, oh yeah, we have the ultimate truth here. It's like, no, but if something is true, those manifestations, you'll see it in all kinds of different ways. So be careful of anybody who's claiming that they came up with this idea. Because I tell people that I really have come up with no original idea myself, but what I've done is tried to report what I've seen out there.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We're starting off strong already, but that is really true. I mean, at the end of the day, humans have been fighting each other since day one, and we've been having conflict since, well, pretty much since someone had a nicer cave than us. And because of that, I mean, there's nothing new. It might be new to us or new to the person who's experiencing it, but it doesn't mean it's a new concept. But I think the value that you contribute and other authors, like we mentioned offline, Rory Miller is a friend of mine and a former guest. The value that you guys contribute is be able to articulate a truism in a way that makes it easily understood by people that haven't experienced it themselves.
And let me springboard off that. And something that I really respect about Rory is his ability to go down to a very deep level, like the bottom of the ocean on the subject, and then get you thinking along those lines. And where a lot of people, shall we say, make mistakes is they take the starting point, if you will, another way of phrasing it, and say, okay, that's all it is. It's like, no, this is a point to get you thinking in a certain way about a subject that can get really deep really quick. But you have to have the right starting point to get that value out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Mark, just for people that may not be familiar with your work because they're living under a rock, or or maybe they're new to the field and they haven't come across you yet. Can you give us sort of the Cliff Notes version of who you are? Do you know how many books you've written? Because I've been struggling to find out how many there are. I looked on Amazon, there was like 4 pages, but I couldn't figure out how many you'd written.
Not off the top of my head, but between books, videos, and ebooks, I don't know, around 30.
Yeah, wow. So how did you get started in this field? Well, let's start at the beginning. How did you end up being Marc Animal MacYoung?
Okay. Being Marc Animal MacYoung and being an author are two different stories. I grew up in the streets of Los Angeles, and there's a term called situational poverty, which is what happens when your family is reduced to poverty versus when you're talking generational poverty, which is generation upon generation have been poor. Those are two distinct things. Well, my family got thrown into situational poverty. So I ended up in the streets and I had to learn how to function there. So, you know, people ask me, well, what qualifies you? And it's sort of like, look, I've been fighting all my life, and in that environment, I had to fight more. But like, I got shot at for the first time when I was 13 or 14, and I was on my way to buy comic books. So, living in that lifestyle, I had to become adept at violence. Well, I got really good at it. Now, how I became an author was I a situation had developed. Some people had a problem, and they came to me and said, "Could you teach us?" Well, I'd been talking about it, and people asking me for a while, but with this official, I was really tired of repeating myself. So I sat down to write a 10-page booklet. I swear it was only going to be 10 pages.
Well, that didn't end up
And
in 10 pages, did it?
no, that one didn't work out well. Um, Next thing I knew, I had a book, and I didn't know what to do with it. So I got a lot of reject letters, and at the time I was working in the movie industry, and there was this guy that rolled onto set, and I mean, you kind of felt like a gravitational shift. And I looked at him, he looked at me, and we immediately recognized that we either had to ignore each other or become friends, because it any other option was not going to happen. Right? I mean, unpleasant. God, get a mop. Why? We got to get the blood spatter off the floor, and the walls and the ceiling. So, you know, his name was John Donovan. He was a explosive expert and editor for Soldier of Fortune magazine. I didn't know this at the time. Well, he and I were talking, and I said, hey, John, I wrote this book. I don't know what to do with it. Publishers are going, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. And he said, send it to me. So I sent him the book. He read it. I asked him how he liked it. He said, I enjoyed it. And I made a call to Paladin Press.
Right.
And, well, the rest is history.
And which book was that?
So
What was your first book?
that was called, well, my title versus what it ended up being at the end were not the same. The title that was published under was Cheap Shots, Ambushes, and Other Lessons.
Right. Okay. Yes, I've read that one.
Yeah, and that was a game changer in the industry, because I was talking about stuff, first of all, about violence, not martial arts, and all the stuff that goes along with it in the street. So I started talking about soft issues back before other people were.
Yeah. Well,
And
we're
that,
way ahead of its time.
yeah, well, it changed the industry. right? And years later, I had somebody. He was a martial artist, and he looked at me and said, "Wait, awareness hasn't always been taught in the martial arts?"
Yeah.
Now, when I got off the floor after I was done laughing, I said, "No, I kind of introduced the idea of that there's more to this stuff than just fighting."
Yeah. Wow. When was it? Was this the 80s, late 80s?
It was first published in '89. Yeah,
Wow. Okay. So that predated a lot of stuff. Was that? I'm just trying
hmm
to think when Jeff Thompson first came on the scene in the UK. Would have been around
Jeff
about
came
the same
out in
time.
the '90s, I believe.
Yeah, early
But
90s. I think his video series came out, his VHS
yeah,
series.
but again, this is the same thing of, you know, I may have cracked the door open, but then came a whole rush of, ex street fighters, ex violence professionals who are talking about this stuff, saying, "Hey, there's more to it than just the physical."
Yeah.
Right. So, like I said, I may have cracked the door, but other people helped kick it open too.
Yeah.
And,
Absolutely.
yay.
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, we're all striving for the same thing, hopefully. So it doesn't really matter who makes the impact as long as someone's improving things.
Well, improving stuff, it's realistically, I hate to see good people get hurt. Okay. That just makes my teeth itch. And a lot of the stuff that was out there was basically a fast track to get hurt and to get in trouble. And this was the goal of bringing forth information that you need if you're going to be in a violent situation.
Yeah, I think that's actually a good segue to what we wanted to talk about, which is getting into the aftermath of violence and the real cost of violence is something that is criminally undertaught. I think, as you said, I mean,
Yeah.
you started introducing the concept of awareness and the pre-contact cues and all those kinds of things that are so important for people to avoid violence. But as much as that is now taught more frequently than it was, is still probably undertaught. But I think probably the area that is most undertaught, and largely because there's a lack of understanding, is the actual cost of engaging in violence. And it
hmm
still drives me crazy when I end up in these conversations, especially online. Um, yeah, and I don't know whether it's just the sample sizes I'm working with, but it seems to be in the US especially. There's this attitude of, well, I would just shoot him, or I would just do this. I wish you would try me because I would knock him out. Yeah. So you know what?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Do you actually have any idea what you're volunteering for at this point?
No, they don't. And the reason for that scream is there is such a misunderstanding. And one of the things that I like is language. I play with it, and I find people. One of the things about the American black culture that I really like is that they have a different definition between stupid, ignorant, and naive,
Okay.
right? Stupid means that the person does not have the physical capability to be intelligent. Okay. And it's a known factor, like fetal alcohol syndrome. It's just this guy is not running on all cylinders. Naive means you don't know, but I love the black definition of ignorance, which is willfully not knowing.
Yeah, that's a good
So
point. Yeah.
calling somebody ignorant is an insult, but it also carries the thing of like you're working at staying ignorant,
I
right?
know I know several people like that, unfortunately.
Yeah, we all do. It's like once you hear the concept, it's like, oh yeah. But the idea of people who are so focused on the physical stuff willfully remaining ignorant of the aftermath is a major problem because those people are influencing other people. So if they were just choosing it to do themselves, good luck, have fun, you know, you're walking off the end, have fun storming the castle, boys. Sorry, Princess Bride reference there.
Yeah.
But but I mean, they're preaching this to other people, and that is a danger to to anybody who listens to it. and yet they are a very loud voice.
And I think not only are they a loud voice, but they're actually appealing to the most vulnerable and those that are most likely to take their message the wrong way, because the people that are receptive to the message of willful violence are the people that most need to know about the costs involved.
Yes, and that how those costs seriously affect what you do before an incident.
Yeah, 100%.
Like,
well, let's jump in.
Trying to walk away from one.
let's jump in. We talked offline just before we started recording about the three main areas. So I'll give the floor to you. You're the one that everyone has downloaded to listen to. So let's gather around the fire and listen to Mark.
All right, we were discussing that there's an aftermath. Well, you can break that aftermath into three different main categories. And there's a lot of overlap, understand. But to understand it, break them into the categories. And the first category is personal. The second category is legal. And the third category is vendetta. Okay, yep. You're waiting for me to continue.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off.
No, that was the time of, well, gee, Mark, tell me about the first category of personal.
Okay, let me try that again. Well, gee, Mark, tell me about the first category of personal.
I'm glad you asked about that.
Just for the listeners, you can tell this is not a rehearsed conversation.
No, but on the other hand, it's a lot of fun. First of all, fighting hurts. Okay, there's going to be pain. And actually, let me back up a second. I want to set the stage. I often tell people that they're only going to have one of two problems when they use their training. One problem is it doesn't work. The other problem is it does.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very simple but profound concept. Okay. Do you know that, going back to personal now, it hurts. Okay. Years and years and years ago, I had heard of this fighting style that was really good for cramped areas. Now, this had become an issue because I had tried to throw a rear-legged round kick in between two pool tables.
Yeah, okay. Right. I can see how this goes wrong.
Yeah, well, it wasn't just the fact that I had really done an owie to my knee, but while I was kind of dancing around doing the owie dance, the guy beat the hell out of me. Right? Yeah. Okay, so maybe I should learn about fighting in cramped areas. Well, turns out that the people were going, look, there's a style called Wing Chun you need to look into. And there was a guy named Hawkins Chung who lived right next to, or his school was right next to where I lived. And I went there, and it turns out that he was sharing a studio with a guy named, some unknown dude named Dan Inosanto.
Oh, just that nobody.
Yeah. Yeah, some, I don't know. Nobody ever heard of this dude.
Yeah, some relief teacher, right?
Yeah, something like that. So the thing was, Danny had Mondays and Wednesdays, and Hawkins had Tuesday and Thursdays, right? Well, I had a job that had a different, other than a normal work week, and we'd pay our fees at the first of the month. And I was going out of town with a sweet young thing, and well, night before I had gotten in a fight in a pool hall. And while I didn't exactly lose that fight, I didn't really do too well. Okay, so I was kind of a hurt and limpy pumpy, right?
Yep.
And, well, I'm heading out, and I was going to go pay my class fees because I wasn't going to be there on first Tuesday of the month. And I walked in, and there was this JKD guy, and he didn't like my looks. but he was JKD guy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I'm here to pay. All right. And it was like, oh, gee, I have a legitimate reason for being there. And he noticed that I was moving a little stiffly. And he goes, what's up with you? What's going on there? And I said, I got in a fight the other night. And this guy's comment was, well, if you knew JKD, you would have won that fight.
Okay. Yep.
Now, when you get angry, how things tense up?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I was about to play show and tell with this guy's vital organs, and I whipped around and went, "Argh!" And all of a sudden I went, ah! Because all those things that had hurt were really hurting.
Yeah.
And I kind of looked at this guy like, I really want to kill you, but I can't. So I turned and limped out of the school. But, that's one of those things. Even if you win, you're going to be in pain. And it's going to last for a few days.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
And that's if you're lucky.
That's, there's win, lose, and draw on all these options. But, there's going to be the pain. There's going to be that aftermath. Boxing fractures or a boxer's fracture is when you break your hand from punching somebody.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
These things happen. I mean, you may walk out of there. I can't tell you how many times I've walked out with cracked ribs. And I mean, that's weeks and weeks of fun and games.
Yeah, it hurts to be alive.
Yeah, pretty much.
The very act of breathing is unfortunate. You're kind of hoping that you don't have to breathe very often.
Yeah, I can tell that you've had that happen.
I've had the ribs. I've had not being able to chew solid food for a week, and not being able to use my right hand for a while.
Yeah, exactly. And then comes the quote healing process. Like the time somebody headbutted me, I had grabbed the guy, and this is how I learned that when you grab somebody from behind, put your your face down, because I grabbed, I was doing security at the time. I'd come up, I grabbed the guy, and he whipped back and hit the back of his head. It moved my nose. Right.
Right. Noses are better when they're stable. Just
that's what they tell me. So I didn't lose control of him, but I did kind of totter over, and he went with me. So I'm laying on the ground, and my partner's trying to control it, and I was like, okay, that one. So we had a medic in our team, and I'm having a bit of trouble, and he goes, here, let me see that. And he checks to make sure that the nasal bones aren't broken, but my septum had been deviated. And he goes, okay, let me see. Pop! And he put it back in place. I screamed like a little girl.
Yeah. Yeah. I had mine fixed surgically, so I was under anesthetic for that. And it was still very unpleasant for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, see, so it was like, you're on my side, I can't kill you. You're on my side, I can't kill you. So you've got the physical aspect of that, but you also have the psychological aspect. And that is something that, I don't know if you're aware of this, but most cases of PTSD, people get over on their own.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. PTSD is not a permanent condition, but it really is going to happen. Now, some people get over with help, and a very small, like 10%, slightly more, never get over it. Okay, but you're in for that ride. And it depends on how much your lifestyle accepts violence as a factor as to how hard that PTSD is going to hit you.
One of the things I found really interesting about PTSD, not that I ever had significant issues with it, was that it was not the incidents that I expected would cause trauma that actually got me. I had some really, really bad ones where, legitimately thought I might be, ending up dead or seriously,
Hmm.
permanently injured, and was able to laugh that off almost immediately. And then in other
Hmm.
incidents where there's comparatively very little risk, that bothered me because I didn't. And I think it was usually about my own action, whether I thought I'd done everything I could have done.
Right, right.
And nothing happened, and yet it still bothered me for months.
Well, let me tell you an example of something very that I found weird. I used to work really close to where I lived, and I would go home for lunch, and I lived in a an apartment building. Well, I turned the corner, and I'm driving down the street to my driveway, and I see an oncoming car that begins to float, and I'm slowing down, and then he comes, and I mean we're head on. Okay, it looks like I'm going to have a head on collision with this guy, and he keeps on floating, and then okay, oh wait a minute, this is going to sound strange to an Australian. He passed me on the right.
Right. Okay. That's all right. I can
Okay.
I can visualize that. Yes.
Yeah. I kind of figured, yeah, well, that's considered traumatic here in the States,
Yeah.
you know, or that's considered wrong.
Yeah. Just had to quickly do the mental flip of passing on the left for our
Yeah,
European European listeners and
yeah, that's not the side that you normally pass you in this country, especially head on. Well, the thing was, I had slammed on my brakes, and instead of just dodging and getting out of the way, as I normally would have done, there was another car following behind that vehicle. So I couldn't pop into the oncoming traffic, right? Or into the oncoming lanes. I had to stop and just hope. Well, as this guy went past me, I saw his expression and he was terrified. Well, I whipped my car around because I saw him turn down a driveway that I knew was a dead end. And I come charging up to his car because I blocked him in, and I'm about to pull him through the window. And I see this guy is just panicked. And it was like, wait a minute. And he goes, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I fell asleep. I've been driving all night.
mm, mm,
Right. Now, I have a rule, which is don't fight unless you're in the right. So, as much as I wanted to like play show and tell with his vital organs, no, I couldn't. Right. It was like, get off the road, get some sleep, da da. Well, I began to have problems with this. And I mean, I was really freaked out. And I kept on having these reoccurring, "Yeah," moments. And I called up my bro and I said, I don't know what's going on because, I've been in way worse situations. Why is this freaking me out? And his comment was, in all those other situations, you chose to be there.
mm.
That gave you control in that
Interesting.
situation. This time you didn't have control,
Yeah. I
right?
think when we're a very otherwise well prepared individual, I think suddenly having to rely on absolute luck and hope as a strategy is quite uncomfortable.
Right, right. And I mean, it really, and that helped me get over it. But that ties in with what you're saying. It hits in some weird places and things that you don't expect, right? So I had no problem going in with a lot of violence, but even then, there was a number of times that things really hurt me psychically or psychologically, um, and that is you got to be prepared for it and also know how to handle it. One of the things like when you get triggered, a memory is really deeply embedded when you have a smell trips you off.
Smell. I think smell is the most emotive sense. I think is the one that sort of
Right,
takes you back the quickest.
right. But you can have a flashback by just a smell,
Yeah, absolutely.
right? And I mean, this is the thing that it can really mess you up. I was working construction site, and it was a weird thing because we're throwing a cable in a building, which basically means we were wiring a building that was they had it was a high rise and they had done the different floors. Well, on the floor I was working, like the CEO's, he had been away for a while, or he'd extended trip away. They put his secretary in her very own office. And I mean, here it is, a construction site, and there's this one perfectly constructed office, right? And she's in it. Well, I'm working one day, and I'm paying attention to what I'm doing, and I was standing in a narrow area, and she came behind me and put her hands on my shoulders to tell me that she was passing. Well, I thought I was alone,
Mm.
and I started to react, right? And I was going to take her head off. And this woman goes, "Shh, you're okay. You're safe. It's just me."
Wow. Okay.
And I went, "Okay, that's good." Right? And I went back to work. Well, I got to thinking about that, and I walked up to her later and I said, "How did you know to do that?"
Yeah, it's a very emotional, intelligent thing.
Yeah, well, it's like, hold it. Most people freak out when I flash like that, right? And because of my background, somebody touching me from behind, not a good thing.
Mm.
And her response was, my ex-husband was a Vietnam vet.
Ah, right. Okay.
And it was like, you know how to behave, right?
Mm. Mm.
Um, the thing is, I and my girlfriends, back when I was, in the life and I had these reflexes, one of our rules was you do not enter the area that I am in without making noise.
Yeah, right. Just so you don't get startled.
Right. And I mean, the thing was just coming in the house going, the two sounds with the two different girlfriends was woof and keef, right?
Yep.
And it was just one of those things to de-wire, or, to hit the safety switch. And one of the worst moments in my life is my girlfriend came home and she swears she had made the sound and I responded. But as she's crawling into bed with me, I wake up and somebody's looming over me,
Right.
and I flashed, right? I picked her up, I threw her across the room, I landed on top of her, I was about to crush her skull. And what had saved her is, as she was going over backwards, she screamed, "It's me." And then she curled up. She did not resist, which would have, continued the process. So I stopped my attack basically. And it was horrible because this is a woman I loved. And I mean, I didn't want to hurt her. But, because of my life of violence, that mistake happened. Right. And needless to say, that relationship ended up falling
Mm.
apart.
Mm. I think this is probably the piece, and that's why this conversation is so important, because it's really easy to be macho about the physical consequences. It's really easy when you're 20
Yeah.
something to go, you know what, I can deal with a broken hand, I can deal with a sore jaw, I can deal with broken ribs, but
Yeah.
can you
Wait
deal
until
with
you can
being?
predict the weather.
Yeah. I
Yes.
mean, you think you can deal with that until you're 50 and everything still hurts, but
Uh-huh.
the I think the idea that you can be completely out of control and be a danger to everyone you love, or
Yes.
adversely impact their quality of life based on the decisions that you make.
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah,
the reactions you make,
yeah. I mean,
right?
the decisions you make to possibly engage in needless violence is
Right.
what I mean. Yeah,
Right. And I mean, that is the thing that really, that is a personal cost that you have to factor in and take steps. And I mean, doesn't it kind of sound strange that my girlfriends and I had sounds to de-wire my reactions?
Yeah, it's not something that
That's
regular
not
people
normal.
think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not something that regular people need, but if you have this ability, you need it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
It's a glimpse into what the damage that violence does psychologically.
Yes. Yes. It costs. And I mean, that was the thing of, you know, my wife. uh, my wife was very impressed on what a gentleman I was, because she and I would walk into a restaurant and I'd pull out the chair for her, right? And then one day she realized, you're doing that so you can keep an eye on the door, aren't
You're positioning
you?
her.
It's like, well, yeah, that's part of it. That's, but I mean, that was a thing of, this stuff doesn't go away. You have to learn how to cope with it,
Mm.
right? And that's got nothing to do with macho. This has to do with everyday functioning, right? And it impacts you, and it really does. You have to work on it. So, that is one aspect of the psychology issue. Another issue is, you know, how do you keep from burning out? Right.
Yeah,
That, I
that
mean,
oversaturation of adrenaline.
yes, yes. How do you function with it? And, once it's there, you can't be paranoid all the time. Eyes up, head on a swivel is a very big term in the shooting world in the United States. And it's like, that's how you burn out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, this is one thing that your imagination will run away with you on this. Well, what if there's 27 ninjas waiting around this corner for me? Right. And what that does is that keeps you in an adrenalized state. So your own mind starts turning against you, saying, well, what if, what if, what if? And this is what I refer to as what if monkeys. Okay. Um, in training, you'll encounter, well, what if I'm walking down an alley with $20 bills hanging out of my pockets and I get jumped by 27 ninjas with Uzis? What do I do? Right. That's one type of what if.
That's
Yeah.
the Q&A section of every self-defense seminar I've ever done.
Yeah, I know. By the way, I call this 27 ninja questions.
I like that. I had someone ask me,
Okay. And
what would you do if you got hit by a baseball bat? I said, bleed? Like, I don't know. I mean, I've already
yeah,
been hit.
lay there and twitch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, see, the thing is, people who are asking that question are often, well, first of all, they're asking the wrong question. They're asking for answers for imaginary scenarios. Okay. Now, imagination is very useful for problem solving, but it's not really useful if they're making up scenarios that are unrealistic, right? So I will give you the term 27 ninja question.
I'm going to steal that. Thank you.
You can't steal as freely given. But the idea of, they're asking very detailed questions, but they've got the wrong details. And that's the big issue.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
yeah, the beast. You can run with that. The problem with what if questions inside your own head is, when somebody asks you a 27 ninja question, you can spot it immediately as, that's a little far over the sanity horizon. But it's harder to do it when you're the one asking it.
Yeah.
When you're inside your head, what if there's somebody waiting for me around the corner? Okay, that doesn't seem over the top. Okay. The counter to that, the counter to this imaginary um, danger scenario is knowledge. Solid, you'll bet your life on it knowledge. Okay. And I have a story about that where my girlfriend went to her friend's house and I was at work. I went over to her friend's house. We jumped in her car, drove to my mom's house. We came back that night to our house. No problem, right? Everything's just typical night. We went to bed. She gets up, she goes to work. I went to work later. So I walk out, and I should tell you that the vehicle I was driving was, well, to be polite, a POS.
Yeah.
It was just a terrible wreck, right? So I come walking out and I see an empty driveway. And my imagination is, oh my God, somebody stole my car.
Yeah,
Right.
I
And
think
I
more than
mean,
that.
minimal, full on freak out. And then, like a bucket of cold water, came the realization of nobody would be that stupid.
Yeah, no one's getting any money for that.
Yeah. And then it was like, okay, so where did I leave my car? Right. Um, Imagination without knowledge is just out of control, especially if it adrenalizes you. And, when we talk about the psychology afterwards, there's going to be a period where you're super hypersensitive. You need to have solid knowledge that you can balance that emotional fear and adrenaline with, right? And if
Yep.
you don't have it, right, you're playing what if. Well, what if this guy attacks me? He is across the room and not paying attention to you. Do you think that might have something to do with uh, whether or not you're going to be attacked?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's as you say, you start to be counterproductive, and I think I had this conversation
Yes.
with I can't remember which guest it was, but we're talking about Cooper's color codes and
Hmm.
staying too long in code red or code black. You only have a certain amount of time that you can spend in that before
Hmm.
you're completely dead. You don't have the ability to function, and your alertness is gone.
Right.
So if you waste it
Right.
on issues that aren't real, then when you actually need it, it won't be available to you.
Well, okay. You just opened a door to another topic or a similar topic, which is, you want to know my advice for awareness, for developing awareness?
Sure.
I mean, what's the best thing you can do? Take up photography.
It's interesting.
Hmm. Look for beauty.
So you're saying
Okay.
not tactical combat photography?
No, I'm talking about, like, oh my God, look at that sunrise.
Can we sell
Right.
this as a self-defense system? I'm sure there's a market for tactical
Yes.
photography.
Yeah. Tactical. You got to say tactical.
It's got to be,
Um,
and
yeah.
black cameras
Photography.
only.
Yeah. Exactly. Um, but the thing is, you exercise your awareness by looking for beauty.
I like that.
And yeah, that balances out if you obsess on looking for danger, that's another way to burn out.
Yeah, I love that because it's something that I completely relate to. When I was
Hmm.
working full time in nightclubs, and you spend all your time looking for this, antisocial behavior. You spend the whole
Right.
time looking for the worst in humanity, and you don't deal with those that aren't. And I
Yes.
found that because I wasn't working in a regular job with holiday pay and annual leave and that
Hmm.
kind of thing.
Hmm.
So I used to, after a couple of years, I realized I needed to keep a savings account of enough money for me to take a couple of weeks off, and I would literally go and do something
Yes.
completely opposite. And for me, it was working
Yes.
with youth leadership conferences and talking to kids that were really well adapted and really well, uh,
Hmm.
had were great kids, and just spending a couple of weeks working with
Right.
high performing,
Right.
polite, pleasant people reset me.
Right. Right. And I had a situation where I was running a correctional center, and I was sitting in a patio garden restaurant with my ex, and I looked around, and it suddenly hit. There was something bothering me, and I couldn't put my finger on it. And it suddenly occurred to me that there was not a single felon in sight.
How unusual.
Yes, exactly. Uh,
So Yeah, so that's really interesting. Just to give yourself a little bit of focus on the opposite side, and I guess it just retrains you and recenters you a little bit to be able to notice when things are out of place again, rather than
Right.
constantly looking for danger. You're actually just a little bit more centered.
Right. And well, to be able to understand danger, you need to understand what isn't dangerous.
The concept of
And that
baseline.
is
Yeah.
right. That's a huge subject in and of itself that is most people skip over. Right. And actually, that does segue into the next part, which is the legal, because
Yeah.
there's a very important point about recognizing real danger and being able to explain how you knew it was real danger.
It's a really big topic and a very important topic, and I think sometimes we almost avoid having these conversations about legal aftermath because jurisdictions are different. I mean, the law here in Australia is different to the US and so on, and
Hmm.
differs from county
Hmm.
to county and state to state in the US as well. But I think the general principles are broadly applicable. I think
Well,
it's
right.
valuable to talk about it.
Okay, let's start with the biggest one of them all. Self defense is a legal term.
Yes.
Whatever your teacher told you is self defense, whatever you heard on the internet, that doesn't matter. Your actions must meet the legal criteria of self defense.
Absolutely.
That is a critical component because there's something that people do not understand about claiming self defense. And that is, it's what's known as an affirmative defense. Now, I'm going to say something that makes attorneys twitch, which is always kind of an entertaining habit to have. But when you claim self defense, you are admitting to a crime.
Yeah, I remember reading that in one of your books, and it
Yeah,
gave me pause when I read it.
yeah. Now, the actual, just to make sure that no lawyers are drooling on themselves over this, um, you are confessing to elements of a crime. That's the
Yep.
technical explanation.
Yes.
Um, but basically, what you're doing is you're coming up and saying, I admit I did it, but I have good reason to do it. Now I'm going to explain to you why these were good reasons.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
So, I mean, once you've pled self-defense, you've admitted to an assault, essentially.
right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And if that falls apart, if your reasons for, quote, why it was self defense falls apart, you can't take it back, say, well, I didn't do it.
Well, that's right. I mean, you're either going to admit that, well, your two defenses are, I didn't do it, or I did do it, but I had reasons for it. So,
Yes.
but once you've chosen the second defense, then the first defense is off the table.
Right. And we refer to that as Saudi. Some other dude did it.
Right. I
Okay.
did it.
Yeah. But, once you claim self defense, and this is again, you know, if you listen real carefully, you can hear the screams of attorneys around the world. Once you claim self defense, the burden of proof shifts to you.
Interesting.
Okay. Yeah. Now, that one, again, technically that's wrong, but it's what people understand. But the actual term is production of evidence shifts to you,
Right. Yes.
which means you now have to prove that the situation warranted physical force on your part in defense of yourself.
Yeah. A term that I heard years ago, and I can't remember who to credit for it, so I apologize if you're listening, was that as soon as you start trying to defend yourself in court, you're trying to explain your actions to 12 people who weren't there, and have probably never been
Well,
anything
yeah,
even remotely similar.
right. And this is where it gets complicated because people, okay, again, kind of taking a side route that's important. In the States, the legal definition of justification is the means by which the accused shows good and legal reasons for the actions he is called upon to answer. Okay, now that's legal argle bargle, but it basically means built into the definition of justification is you proving that the circumstances warranted that response.
Yeah, right. Yep.
Okay, so now you got to prove it. Now, this is something that Genevieve and I have joined together to work in a program called Safety Concepts. And one of the things we teach is crime, conflict, and interrogation. And that is, how does crime happen? What does it look like? How does conflict happen? How do we get into this? And interrogation is how to be interrogated, not interviewed, interrogated by somebody who is really not happy with your decision to use force.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, this is something that, it's a rant that I have. People think all they have to say is self-defense and everybody will know it is self-defense. No, you got to prove. But the other thing is, and this is really a problem with people who get just enough information to get themselves into trouble, that you have to be able to explain what you saw, what you did, et cetera, and why it wasn't something else.
This
Okay?
is really interesting. It's here in Australia, the terminology that is used is reasonable and proportionate to make sure that whatever you
Yes.
did was reasonable under the circumstances, so it would pass what we call the reasonable man test, which is
Right.
a regular person would do the same thing, and that the level of force that you use, which is usually predicated by the amount of damage done,
Mm-hmm.
is proportionate to the threat that you felt. It doesn't have to be the real threat;
Right.
it's the perceived threat. So
Well,
it's very
but
great.
it's not just my feelings. You have to give reasons why you perceive that.
Absolutely. Yeah. You have to be able to justify that there was a reason that you were in fear of your life when the 5'2",
Right.
45-kilogram woman
Yeah.
raised her voice
Yeah.
at you.
And see, if they can tear that apart, you'd already confessed. Now,
Yeah.
one of the things that is indicative of a crime developing is what's called the witness check. And Rory Miller articulated this, and it is yes, I'm he's right on this. I've seen it countless times, and that is somebody just before they're about to commit a crime or assault will often look around to see if there's anybody around who can interfere with that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's a very distinct move that once you know it, I mean, they might as well be standing there with flare gun and horns to yep, that was a witness check right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And it tells you that it's coming. Okay. Well, the thing about it is when you're being interrogated and you've learned this stuff, you know how to say this, you know how to articulate, you say, I saw him do a witness check. And the interrogator is going to go, how do you know he wasn't looking for his friend? How do you
Yeah.
explain the difference between a witness check and looking for his friend?
Yeah. It's and explain that to someone who doesn't have that knowledge.
Well, again, the
Or does have
answer
the
is
knowledge but is willfully ignorant about it.
well, okay, here's the thing with that. A witness check is a fast scan for proximity. Okay? It's a quick head, beep, beep, look both ways, and he keeps on coming. Looking for a friend is a slower search pattern where you look at individuals, right? First of all, you overlook some individuals. Like, I'm looking for my male friend. I'm not, well, I will be looking at the woman, but, I'm not really paying much attention to somebody who doesn't fit the search parameters. And when somebody is possibly that person, I'm going to look at them slower for a second. Nope, that's not him. Look. Oh, there he is. right? So it's a difference in how, um, you know, people, how they look, right?
Hmm.
Now, if you use the term witness check, you better be able to defend that term.
So
Yeah.
just to interject something that might be useful for listeners is from an unrelated field, but so my professional background, I'm a violence management consultant, but part of that is working in security risk management. And there's an expert in the UK named Dr. David Rubens, and he's put together this this group that basically seeks to bring academics and practitioners together. And one thing that he said that was very interesting
Please
about it,
do that. Yes.
yeah,
Okay,
one,
go on.
one thing he said that was very interesting and has broad application across a number of spectrums is that oftentimes very experienced practitioners will do the right thing, but they're not able to articulate why they did the right
Yes.
because they're
Yes.
doing it based on experience and instinct as opposed to an academic process. Whereas academics
Yes.
might know the right thing, but they're hopeless of being able to apply it because they have never lived it and they don't pick up the cues. So
Right. Well,
yeah, so being
keep on going.
just doing the right thing in self-defense, but then not being able to articulate that in words that are understandable to someone who's never lived it, can
Right. Now,
still leave you in jail.
right. Now, one thing, growing up in a weapons environment, um, going to the UK, I was really, shall we say, unnerved by getting in each other's face there. I saw an incident where two guys got nose to nose, and my weapons background was just making me really uncomfortable with that because you don't step into weapons range.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Um, but one of the things is, for example, being able to explain the term attack range. Okay. Now, if you have a term that can explain this concept, and that helps you with your understanding. Well, one of the things that police are taught here in the States, or used to be, is don't let the guy get within 5 feet.
Yeah.
Okay. That's too vague. I talk about attack range, and I got this definition from my friend Sam Walker, which is if you measure from the eyebrow to the floor, that is the distance somebody can effectively attack you without taking a step. So
Okay.
take that
It's a
distance.
yeah, it's a good guideline. I've never heard that one before.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, take that distance, lay it in between you and him, right? And if you are inside that, you are inside his attack range. Okay.
I really like that.
So, oh yeah. Oh, believe me, it's real useful.
Wow, I've been teaching reactionary gap for years, and that's the best explanation I've ever heard. That's great.
Maybe 30 years of doing this has taught me a thing or two.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, and I've got you just in the sweet spot before you start forgetting things.
Yes. Well, the thing is, once you are in somebody's attack range, you shift mental gears, right?
Yep.
And you can function in attack range, but there's all kinds of stuff that is, we could, do an entire show on that alone. But what can you do to be safe while you're in somebody's attack range? Well, first of all, knowing that if you're at the outer reaches of the attack range, the attack's going to be a kick.
Yeah, understanding the range of where you can be assaulted from and what mechanism.
Right, right. And if you're closer, that's where you start running into punching range. You're even closer still, you get elbows and knees and headbutts. But being able to explain attack range, it's like he moved into attack range. Right? Now, I'm not a tall person, and I don't know how tall you are. But one of the things that I use to demonstrate this is I find the tallest person in the room, and I have them step forward, hold out their palm at arm's length, put that palm on my forehead, and then I swing to show I can't reach that guy.
Sure.
Right.
I'm 6'3", so I'm normally that guy.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. Now, one of the problems. Have you ever seen Or have you ever heard the complaint of small people about big people looming?
Yes.
Yes. Well, basically, what we're talking about here is often large people will move into their attack range, and that is intimidating to a smaller person.
Mm, mm. I've had this theory when I teach conflict communication and de-escalation that if you're taller, you need to provide more range because it's not
Yes.
not so much about distance; it's actually about the head tilt and about whether the person has to look up to see you to look at you, and that
Right.
might be the
Right.
mechanism of
That's
intimidation.
not a theory. That's a reality. I
Oh, good.
mean,
I'm glad I'm
yeah,
teaching
that
reality.
well, and I mean the thing is the aggression and like making sharp hand gestures when you're in striking range of somebody, not a good plan,
Yeah,
especially if you're trying to de-escalate.
yeah, absolutely.
But but see, this is the thing that everything, getting this back to legal, everything that you subconsciously saw that allowed you to recognize the danger, you have to be able to consciously articulate.
Yeah,
That's what
yeah,
reasonable man is.
absolutely.
Now, that's hard enough as is. When you're dealing with the legal system, they're going to be trying to trip you up.
Well, that's their whole job. That's it,
Well, partly. Well, okay. There's a difference between an investigation to find out what happened and building a case. All
yeah,
right.
yeah,
Now, in the U.S. system, we have the officer's first job is safety. Their second job is investigation to find out what happened. Then, once somebody has determined that there is a crime, that's a key turning point. They shift to building a case, and that is to trip you up to get you to confess guilt. And this is critical, to make sure certain information is not introduced, and that information is what's going to help your case.
that's really interesting. I haven't heard that articulated quite that way before.
It's really scary. Um, Basically, one of the things, okay, I tell people that the higher level of force that the charges you're facing with that, the more you need an attorney present.
Hmm.
Okay. This is the thing. I have seen countless interrogations where the guy says something that proves that he knew this, that he could explain this, and it would be exculpatory evidence, which would help his case. I've seen the interrogator change the subject so it never comes up, and then claim that it never came up during the conversation, so
Right.
it can't be introduced. So, so there's this game that they play, and I mean, remember, we're talking most cases of violence are in fact illegal.
Yes.
Okay, and the cops are used to people lying, so they're going to trip it up. The problem is, in doing this, they actually trip up people who really were defending themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, when I talk about, the legal aftermath, this is a completely different game than most people think it is. They think, oh, I'll just tell the cop what happened and he'll believe me. No.
Yeah, yeah. I was in the right. I did the right thing. I'll just tell the truth, and I'll be fine.
Yeah, right. Not when somebody's looking to trip you up.
Absolutely. And even if
And
you get away criminally, there's still the aftermath.
that's another type of the civil issue. But, what we're talking about here is, I don't know how it is in Australia, but here in the United States, there is the authority to arrest. Okay. Often you have the order to arrest coming from above. For example, the DA will they'll call the DA and say, this is what we have. And the DA will say, arrest. Okay. Now, he may keep on interrogating you afterwards, but he is under orders to arrest you already.
Right.
Right. So the order to arrest may not come from somebody who was actually on scene.
Okay.
Okay. And that's I don't know how it happens in Australia, but that's something to realize, that that cop may believe you entirely and go, yep, 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 yep. But if he is ordered to arrest you, he will.
Yeah, and look, I think just for context as well. I mean, something like 45% of our listener base are in the US, so it's
Okay.
yeah. So we've got, in fact, I think it's only about 20-something% that are in Australia. The rest are in Europe. So when we're talking about these
But change
concepts,
it for wherever you are.
yeah, the concept's still going to apply.
Right. So you've got that. And I mean, there's a legal issue. And there's also something which is really, really important. And my Latin sucks, so bear with me. Res ipitur lepicusius, I think, or something like that. Basically, it means the thing speaks for itself.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. What that means is if you do a certain thing, past that, you have totally undermined your claim for self-defense.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So you may believe you are utterly and totally in the right and acting in self-defense, but you crossed this line earlier. Okay. Now, the best example here in the United States is a guy named Raul Rodriguez down in Texas who got his gun, put it in his waistband, and left his property and went down the street. And this is after he called the cops and made a complaint, right, about the noise. Went down, confronted party goers. They kind of told him to do an unnatural act with the sheep. And his response was, I was in fear for my life. I'm in fear for my life. I am now defending myself. And he pulled out his gun and started shooting.
Right.
Okay. He claimed he was in fear for his life and it was self-defense. The law saw it, and I'm quoting the Texas statement about that, is he had left his property in pursuit of a quarrel.
That's a really, really nice way of actually phrasing it. In pursuit of a quarrel.
Yeah. Yeah. And basically, he had blown his self-defense thing because he went down the street with a gun to yell at people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to say you weren't looking for the fight then at that point, especially after you've already made the complaint.
Right. Right. So now you've got that. And, oh, by the way, he filmed himself doing this.
Yeah.
He got convicted. He appealed his conviction and got. Turns out he should have just shut up and taken the thing, because he got 20 years. Second time he got life.
Oh dear.
Yeah. But stupid happens fast in this business, and that's something. An analogy I use is, this is like using power tools. Mistakes happen fast and get really bloody.
Oh, I'm going to steal that one as well.
Go right ahead. But you mentioned another type of legal, which is the civil, and that is another ball in and of itself, where, even if you win the criminal, you can be faced with civil charges. So, one of the things that we talk about is, how much does it cost to defend yourself in court after you've defended yourself? And the answer can be anywhere from $10,000 to $90,000 easily.
Yeah, easily.
So it's not just enough to say, yeah, but it was self-defense. That is a huge aftermath issue.
And the years of your life that it can take to get through this process.
And all the money.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's good Lord, just the cost and the stress, and you can lose your house, you can lose your wife, just all kinds of things. That's how come maybe you should think twice about it engaging. And also this whole thing of like, hey, I'm sorry, and walking away, right? That is not just a great way to avoid violence, but if the guy follows you, and this is a what if monkey question, well, what if he follows? If you've made a good faith effort to withdraw, that is an articulatable fact. you can use to say that you were not trying to pursue a quarrel.
Absolutely. And that's my main point when people start talking about preemptive striking is that I don't agree you should wait to be hit. I think that's a bad strategy, but I do think you need to make sure that before you go preemptive, that you've at least made a very discernible effort and a visible, demonstrable effort to walk away or to de-escalate or to do something that justifies that first strike.
Yes. It's called preclusion. Have you done anything that could have precluded using force in that situation?
Yeah.
And that is where, and that's an entire huge legal issue there. But, if you make a good faith withdrawal, right, do not make comments about his mother having sexual intercourse with animals. Okay. There's all kinds of ways you can really screw up. And I hate to say this, but the people who ask what if questions, especially about what if, what if he follows, right? They're the ones who tend to make those mistakes the most. So they need this information more than anybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Right?
unfortunately, they're sometimes the least receptive to it.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. The thing about it is a good faith withdrawal is, all right, I'm leaving, and you back away and turn, and you're out of there, right? The number of people go, well, what if he follows? They don't realize that the reason this guy followed is, they go, yeah, well, I was trying to leave and he followed me. It's like, yeah, and your mouth was running as you were leaving. You really shouldn't have said that about his sister.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And by the way, yeah, keep on going.
I was just going to say that sometimes the body's withdrawing, but the ego is still engaged.
Well, you said that you worked as a bouncer or a violence professional. How many times did you, shall we say, ask somebody to leave and they insisted on leaving while talking trash?
Oh yeah, nearly all the time. I'm trying to save face.
Yeah. Well, but woof, 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 woof. Now, as a professional, you knew not to follow.
Eventually.
Yeah, it took some time because
as an 18, 19-year-old kid, I learned that lesson a couple of times. Well, thankfully, I had mentors that grabbed me and said, "Stop."
Yeah, yes. I cannot tell you the number of times I was grabbed by the scruff of my neck. Not by the other guy, but by guys on my team. No, okay.
Yeah. So go back inside. Go back inside.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah, that's another show unto itself. But let's move on to the other type of aftermath that is not talked about, right? And that's vendetta.
The comeback.
Okay. You want to know hell on earth? You want to know the sign that the next month, if you get that much, is seriously going to suck?
Sure.
Imagine this scenario. You got involved in a physical altercation with somebody, and the cops show up. This guy's standing there bleeding. And the cop looks at him and says, "Who did this to you?" And the guy looks you dead in the eye and says, "I don't know." Kind of brings chills up your spine, doesn't it?
Yeah. That's you can visualize that very easily.
This is gonna suck, right? This guy is gonna handle it or try and handle it himself, or he's gonna bring people. So for the next month, you're gonna have to be looking over your shoulder because there are people out there hunting.
Yeah, and that can be indefinite. And the worst thing is they might have called it off, and you're 6 months down the track, and you still don't know. You're still looking over your shoulder.
Right. Or if somebody else pissed them off in the meantime, and they're focusing on them, but then they just happen to see you at the store.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, hey, it's still there. Yeah. So the thing is, and there's a concept called dignity culture and honor culture. Okay.
Love that.
Dignity culture is rule of law they assume that your rights, your status is guaranteed. Inalienable rights means they cannot be taken away or given away. Okay. Inalienable rights are very much an element of dignity culture. Okay. Now, the reason I took this side trip is that there are other cultures where your honor, your dignity, your social status is dependent entirely on what you do.
Yeah, we had this conversation with Rory Miller way back in
Yeah.
season 1. It's very, very
Yeah.
important to
Yes.
understand.
Yes. And I mean, that's one of the things Rory and I talked about is, understanding when you're dealing with somebody from an honor culture, he is the one who's going to have to act.
That's
Because
right.
if he doesn't, he's going to lose face.
Mm-hmm. And that has real repercussions for him. It's not just ego.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. This isn't all in his head. In his culture, if he doesn't address this wrong done to him, there's going to be consequences. So he's got to come at you.
And this is why you see otherwise good kids that get involved in drive-by shootings and gang issues, because they have to maintain their spot or to progress in the pack, and they might not want to do it, but yeah, too bad.
They gotta. Well, and the other thing that is, when you think about honor cultures tend to exist in places where laws are not that strong.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, you don't really have to go that far. You don't have to go to another country to run into this, because this isn't just other countries. This is among the lower socioeconomic groups in your country.
Yes.
So,
yes, very true.
so the poor are very much an honor culture. Now, if they're poor and ethnic, you got a double dose.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So this is the sort of thing. Honor cultures tend to really demand vendetta, and they'll get people involved. Then you have the narcissistic personality, who will be operating on something incredibly similar to that. They will want to, quote, even the odds, but in fact, that means they win.
Yes. Yes.
And whatever slight they gave you justifies whatever level of response they heap upon you.
Yeah.
So, because you insulted his honor, okay, you may not think you did anything, but as you're standing in line getting, kebab, right, you get knifed in the back.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've told this story before. I got hit over the head with a can of beans while in the dairy section of a grocery store by a guy thrown out of a nightclub 3 weeks earlier. I'm just so incredibly grateful he used the smooth side and not the edge side, or else you would have been a mess with me.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and I mean that is the sort of thing that this guy's. Some people's version of getting the last word is kind of wet and messy.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, this is, the aftermath of a physical altercation could be, I mean, there's going to be the psychological, there's going to be the legal, and there could be vendetta.
Yeah. And they're all protracted. None of this is over when you decide the fight's over. It's over when all these phases and all the parties concerned believe it's over.
Exactly. So, I mean, a fight that is over inside 15 seconds can go on for years. And I mean, this is also, by the way, God help you if you're dealing with a group that deals with feuds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've got issues here at the moment. Well, not at the moment, but we've got issues here regularly with tribal conflict for different cultures and so on. And these conflicts can go on for generations.
Mm-hmm. Or you can go down to Tasmania where they have the banjo music.
I lived there for 3 years. Sorry to my Tasmanian listeners, but it's true.
Yeah, it is. But yeah, and I mean, generational feuds, these things go and they involve your entire family, right? And again, if you're in that lifestyle, you'll understand it. And that's part of the reason why there is often so much work to keep this from happening, right? There are rules about how to do this stuff, right? Now, I grew up in a barrio, which was tribal. Um, and the thing about it is, rape was a killing offense.
Yeah.
Okay. If you rape somebody's sister, they would kill you. Well, the problem is that meant your family was obligated to respond, right? And that way you kill one of theirs, they kill, blah, 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 and this can go on for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
But you'd also, what people don't realize is that in those environments, there were also negotiated settlements.
Yeah.
Like, okay, she was drunk, she was coming on to him, he raped her, so you can beat him up, but you can't kill him.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, it's a plea deal almost.
Yes, exactly. And I mean that, when you're dealing with these groups, this is a fact. And I mean, you may not be fighting one guy. Growing up where I did, there was a family that I used to joke, if you fought one of their members, you better have half of Los Angeles on your side because they have the other half on.
Mm, mm, mm.
Right.
One of the just a quick sidetrack before we wrap up, but one of the wildest and most chaotic brawls I ever saw all started because a young Tongan kid happened to get into a fight with let's say he was a senior bikie in the rebels, and the bikie had just come back. He just had neck surgery, and anyway, mouthed off at this kid. The kid punched him, aggravated his neck injury. And the next week we had so many. The whole place was full of bikies, and then half of Polynesia arrived. And
Oh yeah.
I was like, at this point, we're looking around, and there's only four bouncers on, and we're like, we just need to basically get everybody who's not involved away from this, and then just contain them to one room because we're not getting involved.
Right. Yeah, there's no happy ending here, and it's damage control from there on. And yeah, that is real. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways that the aftermath can manifest, and you need to be prepared for that. Going in, it doesn't end when a body hits the floor. And that's something a lot of people in training don't understand. And the question is, how many of them don't want to understand?
Well, how many people buy a car because of the color and not the mileage?
Yeah, well, no, I'm talking about ignorance here.
Yeah, true. Yeah, it's and I think, as you said at the very outset of this, you have to understand these elements. You have to understand the cost of your decision because that impacts the pre as well. I mean, it understands how you're going to shape things, what you're looking for, how you're going to conduct yourself, and then it also impacts definitely the during and how far you're going to go and when you're going to stop and
right.
the awareness.
Well, see, and that you just brought up a key thing that Jen and I mentioned in our book. What you don't know can kill you. Is the pre-behavior is critical in the aftermath of legal.
Yeah, 100%.
And a lot of people aren't training that. People aren't wanting to hear that. So, the question is how much of it is the instructor doesn't know it. So and you can't teach what you don't know versus you ignore it because of, people don't want to pay for it.
Well, yeah, and that is unfortunately the commercial reality of teaching self-defense in in that capacity is that people sign up to do jab cross eye jab throat strike. They don't necessarily sign up to listen to a lecture on the law. But what is more relevant in modern first world societies? Unfortunately, as a conversation I've had several times with different commercially successful martial artists, what eliminates systems or schools these days is not their students losing fights, it's keeping the lights on. So to some degree, you've got to be able to be commercially sensible, but you still have to be able to deliver information that is responsible.
Right. And the cheap compromise is what is called a hand wave. Oh, yeah, we teach about that. Yeah, no problem. We'll cover that one. And then they spend the rest of the time teaching, throat punch and eye gouge.
Yeah. If you're listening out there and you have this concern, another cheap solution is say, I don't teach about that, but you should listen to the Managing Violence podcast because they talk about all these issues.
That is a very good bit of advertising you just did there. Well played.
And buy Marc
Yes.
MacYoung's books.
Well, you can get to that too. But yeah, that just the idea of, you can't come up with solutions to problems if you don't know what the problem is.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's unfortunately, as you said, there are those that are willfully ignorant. I think the tide is turning. I think more people are trying to become aware, but the downside of having so much information readily available now is the filtering process, and hopefully conversations like this can assist with that.
Well, and that is where, one of the things of you listen to an expert, right? And when that expert is telling you, you don't have to worry about that, knowing the law is for pussies, that's not an expert.
No.
But when you talk to people who have experience, or when people with experience says, listen to what that guy's talking about, right? You have given some really good indicators of what you're talking about. Okay. Including hi, we have the Polynesians and the bikers about to kill each other. How about we get everybody out of the room who isn't a player?
Yeah.
That is a simple. Yeah, but think about that. That is if you don't have the experience, you don't know that is even a possibility.
Yeah.
Much less a problem that you're facing.
Yeah, it's it's risk mitigation, isn't it? But again, if you if you haven't been there, you don't know what you're looking for and what the risks actually are. So it's hard to know how to control them.
What, I have to think about this subject? What do you mean? Yeah, trust me. You got that is the same thing. We're doing security in quotes training, and a lot of this is introducing people to issues they don't know exist, much less don't have a solution for.
Yeah, it's the eternal challenge for us is educating people about the problem and then solving it for them. But oftentimes people don't want to pay for a solution to a problem they didn't realize they had.
Right. Well, and this is also, a big thing is, when it comes to developing safety and security teams is, we're not going to tell you how to do it. We're going to tell you this problem exists. This is why it's a problem. We're going to help you understand the standards that whatever answer you come up with have to meet.
Yeah, and I think that's a really strong point. It's as we've talked about throughout all of this. You can't be ignorant to the aftermath because it is so vital. Whether it's a personal, whether it's illegal, whether it's the vendetta and your safety going forward, the safety of your family going forward, you cannot be ignorant to it because it's a reality that you sign up for as soon as you get you get involved in this situation.
Yes.
I think that it's such a vital conversation to have, but let's draw it to a close there because we need to. There's plenty of meat on the bone to talk about in a following episode. But for the sake of drawing this one to a close, if people want to learn more about you, buy your products, where can I send them?
Amazon.
Yeah, there are 4 pages. I checked.
Okay. Again, this is one. Remember, I've been doing this for 30 years. One of the books that we're really pushing right now is Wadicki, What You Don't Know Can Kill You, How Most Self-Defense Training Will Put You in Prison or the Ground.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That is not a book of techniques. That is a book of issues that your training has to cover and why it's important to know this stuff.
I'll make sure I pick that one up. I haven't got that one yet, but that sounds like it's going to be essential reading.
Well, it really is for not just developing the training program, But if you are learning this stuff, this is covering the holes in what you're being taught and not being told that this is an issue, right? And we have a character named Tyler. And I'm really dating myself here. The original Saturday Night Live had a Mr. Bill show where you had this little character going, "Oh no, Mr. Bill!" Right? Well, Tyler, that's Tyler. We show Tyler in all these scenarios and how things can go horribly wrong. And I mean, we just beat the hell out of Tyler. Thing about it is, all of these stories are based in actual events. Okay? I mean, we're talking about this happened. We just changed the name to Tyler. Right? And it helps people understand, oh, that's why it's important. So, yeah, Amazon, I do a lot of technical work on specific issues. One of the things that is rather fun for me is I did a series called Writing Violence.
Yeah, that's I wanted to ask you about that, but it's probably a topic for another day. But
no, it's basically how Hollywood and writers get violence wrong, and then I go into the details of this stuff. And a lot of it, since it's not style specific, there's none of the no, well, that's wrong, we do it this way in our style. I mean, this is just letting authors know, like, I have an entire chapter in one of them about the differences between covering blocks and deflections and parries, right? Of, hey, guess what? This is kind of important, and here's the differences. Like, blocking hurts, but it doesn't hurt as much as covering.
Yeah, it's and man, there's so much value to be had there with engaging people like yourself to make, especially if we're talking about fiction, just to make it more engaging. Because one of my favorite authors is Barry Eisler, and one thing I like about Barry Eisler's books is that when he's talking about a fight scene, I'm engaged in it because it smacks of someone who knows what they're talking about.
Yep. Barry's a friend of mine, and
you
should have heard you should have heard the conversation we had about, well, wouldn't his situational awareness be so high that wouldn't happen? It's like, yeah, and then comes the bum that just walks in and throws a wobbler into everything. So yeah, I was doing technical consulting on a lot of his books.
Oh, there you go. Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So yeah, and I mean, that is the stuff of the reality. And when you get reality, it's reality.
Yes.
It's like, okay, that's right. I'm working with a guy named John Curley, and we're doing a book about when does Hollywood get it right and why.
Oh, that's interesting. I've never heard that approach before.
Well, I good Lord, I could fill a library with all the times they get it wrong, right? But the times that they get it right, it's like, watch that scene and pay attention to it because they are right.
No, that sounds very interesting.
Mm-hmm. And if nothing else, it's a great excuse to watch movies. No, honey, I'm doing research. Really, seriously.
Very good. All right, Mark. Let's draw it to a close there. I'll put links to those products and your websites in the show notes. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I'll keep you on the line because we're going to jump in and do the Patreon questions as soon as the actual show is over. So if you want to learn more, get Mark's response to the Magnificent 7 bonus round questions, then make sure you go over and subscribe on Patreon. But for now, thank you very much for your time, Mark. It's been a tremendous honor and very informative to talk to you after many years of absorbing your written word.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed being here.
Thank you once again to Marc Animal MacYoung. As I said at the start, one of the true legends and pioneers of this field that laid the framework for people like myself and many others to walk upon and to hopefully make our own contributions, but none of which would be possible without his contributions to this amazing field and endeavor of a human study. So thank you again to Marc. It was a tremendous honor to sit down and listen to him and talk to him and pick his brain for an extended period of time. We spent nearly 2 hours together, and it's a tremendous honor for me to be able to do that. Now, if you'd like to be part of the Patreon Tribal Council or Tribal Elders and hear the bonus content, head on over to www.patreon.com/managing violence. Sign up today and you can hear bonus content from all our guests so far in season 4, as well as written transcriptions for our tribal elders. Until next time, I am Joe Saunders. This is the Managing Violence podcast, and I'll talk to you again next time. This has been Season 4, Episode 4 of the Managing Violence podcast. Make sure you check out our social media as well as our website at www.joesaunders.com.au. We look forward to entertaining you again next time.